the country right now bracing for a major hurricane, while the president, through his statements and bluster here in Washington, fueling some political storms of his own. I'm Mary Alice Parks, joined by my colleague Justin Fischel, Allie Rogan, and a special guest today, again, 2 days in a row. Welcome to the briefing room, Tom Bossert, an ABC News contributor and former Secretary of Homeland Security, the department, the agency that does so much federal disaster response.
Unfortunately, I'm only here when there's a bad day.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Tom, yesterday the president was really confident talking to reporters and to the American people, said the country was totally prepared as anyone has ever been for a hurricane of this magnitude. Is there a political risk or an actual risk to sending a message like that, or is this what the country needs to hear?
Well, look, a little bit of both, right? So you want the president to strike the note that you want the rest of emergency managers to strike. Take this seriously. Don't look at this as if it's not really a problem and then get yourself into trouble. So I don't think he meant to send a message that you should sit home and watch this on TV and not take precaution. Personal accountability is just that. That's the message and theme of the day. His emergency managers and FEMA directors and all those beneath him are making that point. I think what the president wanted to do is reassure the American people that from his vantage point, those federal agencies are poised to help. That doesn't mean this is going to be easy. It doesn't mean this won't be messy. And it also, unfortunately, doesn't mean there won't be loss of life.
And he knows it's a big political issue, hurricanes. I mean, and you were with him during one of the worst hurricane seasons on record. How is he responding right now? What's going on behind the scenes, you think, with the president?
Well, you know, he's taking it seriously. And by that, I mean he's dedicating time and personal attention to it. So presidents have to delegate a lot of things. And right now he's got it on his mind. He's watching the coverage of it. He's taking the phone calls and the time and the meeting space and clearing his schedule. So I think that's important. But when he goes out with the bluster, look, he is who he is. He's President Trump. He's got a lot of confidence in himself and in his team, and he's going to cheerlead for them. I don't think that should be taken as him saying, don't worry about this, we've got it. There's a lot of hard days ahead of us, and there's going to be a lot of frustration ahead of us.
There's been this big push for evacuations. About 1 million people under mandatory evacuations. We've been hearing it from governors and mayors, just get out of Dodge. I keep wondering about the people that really struggle to evacuate, that don't have cars of their own or places to go. What responsibility do local governments, the federal government have to help some of those people?
Yeah, so look, the first and foremost responsibility here is not only on individuals, but those state and local authorities and volunteer organizations. The federal government ultimately gets a lot of attention, but provides very little support in this regard. So even the shelters that are authorized by the federal government, in some cases funded by them, are run and certified by local volunteer organizations. Even the Red Cross, they deserve a lot of credit, and Salvation Army and others like that. So right now, there are services available, but the federal government doesn't provide services to individuals until after this has reached a point where it's exceeded the state and local's collective capability. And the president's issued an emergency, but not major disaster declarations yet. So you'll see some volunteers, but you're not going to see a lot of federal resources for people yet.
Yeah, it's just a scary time. Everyone has to be on high alert. But I want to ask all of you guys about another story that was making a lot of headlines, a lot of buzz overnight. Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley was out overnight and this morning accusing this administration of moving funds, $10 million from FEMA response to ICE, to immigration services, and is saying that this moving of the money coincided with that zero tolerance policy, separating children from parents at the border. Allie, I know you've been researching this all morning, these sort of pretty dramatic headlines. And this morning we had the FEMA director on Good Morning America responding to this. I want to listen to what he had to say and then ask you guys what you thought about it. So let's listen to that.
The $10 million, the funds that were moved from FEMA to ICE, does that affect your preparations at all, the loss of that money?
No, not at all. It's just an attempt to divert away from the life safety issues at Florence. It does not come out of the disaster relief fund that funds everything behind me, that funds everything in the field. So it's a non-issue for us at this moment.
So a non-issue. Allie, you think he's right?
Yeah, so this was $10 million that came from FEMA's operational budget. And so that is administrative costs. Senator Merkley called this a scandal, but it may actually be more of a case of bureaucratic sausage making. These are funds that are totally separate from a $25 billion disaster relief fund that also exists, that is separate from this. And Tom was saying off camera that it may actually be a lot more money than that. And also, the other thing to keep in mind is that, yes, $10 million sounds like a lot of money because it is a lot of money.
If you're dealing with disaster relief.
Exactly. I mean, you consider giving that money to Puerto Rico Rico recovery efforts would be a huge boon. However, this is, again, money that was never meant to be spent directly on disaster relief. So
doesn't mean a home is not going to get built somewhere necessarily.
It's not the denial of those services. This is a totally different bucket of money.
Tom, you were an advisor in this White House. Is this political spin or is this a real story?
It's political spin. The Department of Homeland Security has an over $40 billion annual budget. So to put it in perspective, we're not talking about $10 million compared to the Disaster Relief Fund or even to FEMA's $1 billion appropriations. We're talking about internal moving of money in a $40 billion organization.
But so we get that. I think we're in agreement. That may not be the scandal here. But I think what's rubbing people the wrong way is the comments from yesterday. This is an unsung success.
Justin, you're just taking my next question.
Okay.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, and giving himself A+ grades from a mystery group of people that haven't given him these grades.
Okay, but let's take a moment. Let's fill people in. Yesterday, what Justin's referring to, at the White House, the president was asked about the White House's response to the disaster in Puerto Rico a year ago, the response to Hurricane Maria. He said it was an unsung success, a huge success. We're going to get into it more later, but he's been in a political Twitter battle with the mayor of San Juan again. What do you guys make of this? Tom, was it an unsung success in Puerto Rico?
Yep, absolutely. And here's the thing. There's a lot of empathy that we need to put behind this answer, so I'll try to do that very quickly. There's loss of life. There's suffering that continues. There were conditions that were deplorable in Puerto Rico that predate the storm that require a whole lot of extra attention that wouldn't normally accompany a storm and its recovery. But the actual mobilization and logistics effort that went into sending in federal and volunteer resources into that island right after Puerto Rico was not only a huge effort, it was unprecedented, and it was well run, and it saved a lot of lives.
But of course, FEMA's own after-action report.
That's different from suggesting that we've gotten ourselves a year to date back into a position in which things are rosy in Puerto Rico. In fact, it took more than 10 years to recover after Katrina. And so there's a whole sense of moving goalposts on what the president's trying to take credit for.
Actually,
and they're trying to make him look like he's not compassionate in this regard.
Well, I think he didn't look too compassionate, to be honest. He talks about a success, and he doesn't mention some of these things. I mean, 83% of residents reported in a Kaiser Washington Post poll that came out this week that their lives were dramatically impacted by employment setbacks, worsening health problems, damage to homes, loss of power for over 3 months. And that's almost every single resident. I mean, the idea that you can talk about the success, even if there was unprecedented response, when there was also so much hurt, so much loss of life, is just makes him sort of look a little cold, I think, and that's what people were responding to.
I think that's fair, but it's like the nomenclature issue we just talked about a moment ago. It sounds like a $10 million scandal at first until you dig into it and learn the scale and the context of it. When you talk about the nomenclature here, we separate the mitigation and planning from the response effort, the life-saving effort that we're going to mobilize here for Florence, and conversely, what we mobilized for Puerto Rico right after the storm. And then we talk about recovery separately. The recovery efforts are plagued with bureaucracy and slowness and distrust among contractors and people that spend public money on behalf of public elected officials who are there to put trust measures in place. And so at this point, it's almost a no-win game for him. But he's, I think, rightfully proud of what he mobilized to respond and do the life-saving mission in Puerto Rico. And so he took a little credit for it. I think maybe he's getting a little blame.
But something that Tom said right at the beginning of what you said was, I want to put some empathy behind the president's statement. I think just underscores that it's got to be frustrating for the folks that are communicating these things within the White House to make the points that Tom is making and finesse the points that the president's making.
Right,
if I could, and I don't want to go belabor this, but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico and with the people of Puerto Rico and with the governor, and they need to know that from my experience, the president does have that behind-the-scenes, off-camera empathy for them. He sent me down there a lot, and what they're dealing with, I would report back to him, and he couldn't fathom it, right? So he does have that sense, and they should hear that.
Well, I want to bring in more of our colleagues. Everyone's talking about this today. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, raised a lot of eyebrows. And Democrats on Capitol Hill, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, was demanding an apology from the president. I want to bring in John Parkinson, our colleague up there. John, what has the response been to the president's comments on Puerto Rico? And are lawmakers going to continue to push him on this? You know, we haven't seen that much oversight on the response from Puerto Rico. If they're really upset, is there more they should be doing?
Yeah, the Democrats have really been, condemning the president's comments. I spoke with Steny Hoyer, the House Democratic whip, today. He was very critical of the president's comments that this is an unsung success. I think from the other Democrats, I talked to G.K. Butterfield yesterday, a Democrat from North Carolina ahead of the storm. And while he's bracing for its landfall, he tells me that he's pretty confident in what the first responders have done for preparations. He wants to get out of the way, let them do their job, and then when he sees problems come up, that's when he's going to step in and conduct that oversight.
And so in the next few days, are you expecting lawmakers to be out there, be in front of the cameras, or is this a moment where they really try to take a back seat, like you said? Is there a way to support local authorities from behind the scenes?
Yeah, some Republicans and Democrats that I talked with yesterday down in South and North Carolina, they just told me that they want to be able to be a means of communications to their constituents. When the first responders need to get a message out, they want to be able to use their reach to their constituency to help convey that message. And they're really underscoring the dangers of this storm, right? We might see a couple of inches of rain in the first couple of days, but this is something that's going to have impact for weeks on end, and they're really concerned that even just a couple of inches could cause widespread damage and widespread flooding.
All right, well, John, stick with us because we're going to pivot to politics, and I know you have no shortage of thoughts and opinions on that, but I want to say goodbye to Tom Bosser, our ABC News contributor, former advisor there at the White House, and Ali Rogan. Thank you so much. Or are you going to stick with us? You're going to talk politics, too.
I can stick around. Do
Okay,
whatever you guys
we're
want.
going to keep chit-chatting. But, Tom, thank you so much.
you.
Before we're going to, have this awkward sort of you snaking out here, I want to take, if we have him, 538's Micah Cohen, out with some big news today from our friends over at 538. A new forecast about the Senate. We are under 60 days to those midterm elections, and we're curious what all you guys over there at 538 are saying. What is the likelihood that even the Senate could maybe flip control?
Yeah, the midterms are coming up fast, right? So we launched our Senate forecast today. It shows Democrats with a 1 in 3 chance of winning a majority. That obviously gives Republicans about a 2 in 3 chance of keeping it.
And I was struck not only by, wait, let's bring that graphic up one more time. What is really interesting to me here is the high probability of a 50-50 split. Talk to me about whether or not that is possible.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, the Senate is so evenly divided now, and you have sort of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object this year in that the environment is so good for Democrats, but the Senate map is so good for Republicans. And those two, at the moment, according to our forecast, are canceling each other out a bit, and you end up with sort of a tie in the end. You could get a tie. In that case, of course, the vice president, Mike Pence, would break it, and Republicans would keep the majority.
Right, the last time we've had a split like that was in 2001, and we had a lot of jostling over chairmanships and just what to do and how to handle that. But I think you're right. It's important to remind people that this map was so favorable for Republicans this year. Ali, it was supposed to be a lifeboat in a way for Republicans, that they would only be defending a handful of seats, whereas Democrats would be having to defend double digits. There are 10 Democrats who are defending their seats in states that the president won. And yet somehow we are still talking about a possibility, according to 538, a 1 in 3 chance possibility of Democrats taking that chamber. What do you make of that? What is going on here where the map could be so favorable for Republicans, but Democrats seem to be canceling that out?
Yeah, it's unbelievable because I don't think anybody would have thought at the beginning of this session that this is where we would be now. And just yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was in Kentucky talking very honestly about the fact that some of those Senate races, including some of the ones you were talking about, those 10 states the Democrats represent that President Trump won, including North Dakota, West Virginia, he called those Indiana, he called those dead even, in addition to places where Republicans' efforts were supposed to be a little, their chances were supposed to be almost a foregone conclusion, including Tennessee, Arizona. The Democrats there are very seriously in play, and that could, as Micah was saying, have huge implications for what the balance of power means in the Senate.
In Texas.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Texas.
I mean, Micah, the forecast, as I have it, the model from 538 shows Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic challenger to Ted Cruz, with about a 3 in 10 chance of beating the senator there from Texas. Now, 3 in 10, obviously, so still not likely, still not favored, according to your modeling, but that's still going to be buzzy. That's still going to get a lot of attention. Talk to me about that race and some of the other red states.
Yeah, I was actually a bit surprised that the model was that bullish on the Democrats' chance in Texas. I mean, part of the big thing going on there is, if you look at how much money Beto O'Rourke has raised, it is a ton. And fundraising has historically been a decent predictor of how well these candidates do. I mean, we all know that Texas has gotten more purple over the years, but I think you have a chance where those changes are combining with the good national environment for Democrats, combined with they have a really good candidate down there, and altogether it's giving them an outside chance here. Not even that outside, 1 in 3 is a pretty good chance.
And I don't know if we still have John there talking to us from Capitol Hill, but tell us what your impressions have been from lawmakers. Is there an anxiety that they're feeling, that you've seen Republican lawmakers feel worried about the possibility of both chambers flipping in November?
Well, I haven't heard as much anxiety about the Senate flipping. I think that, this forecast today is going to put a little new fear in a lot of Senate Republicans. But certainly in the House, there's a widespread concern there from House Republicans that the majority is already gone. I talked to one member a couple days ago who didn't want to be identified, but he did tell me that he thought there's a lot of trouble, that it's not looking good at this point, even 50 days out or a little more, that they're kind of writing it off. And so I think that as much as they can, they're looking to grasp at some of these singular seats and just do as little damage as they can to their majority.
Well, John, we appreciate your insights there from Capitol Hill. We started talking about a storm, and I think we should quickly end with another storm.
Never-ending storm.
Very nice.
A never-ending storm. Thank you.
Alice.
Stormy Daniels was on The View today. Yes. One of those women who's accused the president of an affair, and had accused him all along of actively working to try to silence her and her story. She had this rather personal response to describing the moment she found out that Michael Cohen, the president's former personal lawyer, had said in court that he was directed or working with the president to actively try to keep her story from coming out. So let's take a listen and let's watch that moment on The View today. I thought it was quite something.
Did you feel vindicated? I was so overwhelmed I just broke down into sobs. Because I didn't realize how much pressure I had felt. People call me all kinds of names, and who cares? But to be called a liar and people not believe me for months and months and months had really taken its toll. So it was just so, vindicated. I just felt like all this weight came off my shoulders. And, Travis said, how does it feel to now know that the world knows that you've been telling the truth?
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's that the president, we've just learned, is not going to enforce the Non-Disclosure Act that he had her sign, which means she's free to tell her story.
Though she kind of joked that she had been already skirting the non-disclosure agreement.
Of course. But now, that's a huge burden off her shoulders. That's a huge legal burden off her shoulders. So all of a sudden, we've got a book cover out.
Everyone's writing a book.
She seemed poised to do this.
And what's interesting between Stormy and the other people who have recently written a book is she wasn't in the White House. So I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of the people who can come out and question her integrity or say, well, that's not how she said it in XYZ meeting, because this doesn't include anything that happened within White House palace entries.
And to your point, her story is out there.
Right.
And I think in terms of what political damage this may put on the president, I don't know. I see that damage has been largely done already.
They joked at the end of that interview about her attorney, Mike Levinati, potentially running for president.
Yeah.
What do you think voters would really make of that?
They seem to be responding where he's going pretty well. He's certainly, stylistically, he could be an interesting counterpart to the president, but we've seen a lot of other candidates like him fizzle out.
I've said this. I think I know he's taking this seriously. He's having meetings. He's getting advice on how to run his campaign, and I think that he represents an interesting rhetorical sort of counterweight to the president. How serious it actually is, there's plenty of time to find that out, but we'll see.
We'll see. He is making waves for sure. I'm Mary Alice Parks, joined by Justin Fischel and Ali Rogan. Thanks for watching The Briefing Room. We'll see you back here tomorrow.